There are places on this planet where humans simply do not belong, not because we lack the will to go there, but because our bodies were never designed to survive them. Above 8,000 meters, you enter what mountaineers call the death zone. The air holds so little oxygen that your body begins to consume itself. Your muscles weaken, your brain slows. Every breath becomes a desperate negotiation with physics. And yet, for over a century, climbers have willingly walked into this realm of slow suffocation, driven by something stronger than survival instinct. 14 mountains on Earth pierce through that 8,000-meter threshold. 14 summits where the atmosphere thins to the edge of what human lungs can process. Most people have heard of Everest, the tallest of them all, now crowded with guided expeditions and Instagram posts from the roof of the world. But there is another peak, one that doesn't care about your experience, your sponsorships, or your supplemental oxygen tanks. A mountain so brutal that for decades, roughly 1 in every 4 climbers who reached its summit never made it back down alive. They call it the Savage Mountain. K2. Standing at 8,111 meters, K2 is the second highest peak on the planet. But height alone doesn't explain its reputation. Everest is taller, yet far more forgiving. K2 is different. Its slopes are steeper, its weather is more violent, its location is so remote that rescue is often impossible. And unlike Everest, where commercial expeditions have carved a relatively predictable path to the top, K2 offers no such mercy. Here, the mountain decides who lives and who dies. Until recently, more humans had traveled to space than had stood on K2's summit. That fact alone should tell you everything about what this peak demands from those who dare attempt it. This is not a mountain you conquer, it's a mountain you survive, if you're lucky. And for the dozens who now lie frozen somewhere along its ridges, luck ran out long before the summit came into view. This is why climbing K2 is a death sentence. Most mountains earn their names from the people who live in their shadows. Local villagers, ancient tribes, generations of farmers who watch the peaks change color with the seasons. These names carry meaning, stories, history. But K2 has no such legacy, no folklore, no ancient tales passed down through centuries. Just a letter and a number, cold and clinical, assigned by a British surveyor who never even attempted to climb it. In 1856, a British survey team was mapping the Karakoram Range, trying to establish the border between Kashmir and China. Their method was simple: spot a peak, measure its height, and label it K1, K2, K3. The K stood for Karakoram. The numbers were just placeholders, meant to be replaced later when the surveyors asked locals what each mountain was called. For most peaks, this worked. Gasherbrum, Kanjut Sar, names with roots and meaning, but when they pointed toward the massive pyramid of rock and ice we now call K2, nobody had an answer. No village sat close enough for its residents to have given it a name. No trade route passed near enough for travelers to have christened it. The mountain was so isolated, so removed from human civilization, that it simply existed without identity. So K2 remained K2, a designation born from absence. And that absence tells you everything about what awaits anyone who tries to reach its summit. Getting to K2 is a brutal expedition before the climbing even begins. There are no roads, no airports nearby, no convenient helicopter drops to base camp. Instead, climbers must embark on a week-long trek through some of the most unforgiving terrain on the planet. The approach crosses the Baltoro Glacier, a river of ancient ice riddled with crevasses and unstable seracs. One wrong step can mean a broken ankle, or worse, a fall into a bottomless crack in the ice. The rocky trails beyond the glacier are no gentler. Loose stones, steep ascents, the constant threat of rockfall. And every night, climbers sleep in tents. No warm tea houses like on Everest, no lodges with hot meals and beds. Just fabric walls between you and the freezing mountain air. But the isolation carries a far darker consequence. If something goes wrong on K2, help is not coming. The mountain sits dangerously close to the contested border between Pakistan and India, meaning only the Pakistan Army is permitted to fly in this airspace. Rescue helicopters are rare, and even when available, the altitude and weather often make extraction impossible. Injuries that would be survivable on other mountains become death sentences here. A broken leg, a case of severe frostbite, pulmonary edema setting in faster than expected. On Everest, these might earn you an emergency airlift. On K2, they earn you a grave. By the time climbers finally reach base camp, they have already survived a journey that would break most people. They stand at 5,000 meters, exhausted, battered, and staring up at over 300 meters of vertical hell, still waiting above them. The real climb has not even begun. Above 8,000 meters, the human body begins to die. Not slowly, not gently. It starts consuming itself in a desperate attempt to keep functioning in an environment where survival was never meant to be possible. Mountaineers call this threshold the death zone, and the name is not poetic exaggeration. It is clinical fact. At sea level, the air around you contains roughly 21% oxygen. Your lungs absorb it effortlessly. Your blood carries it to your muscles, your organs, your brain. Everything works the way evolution intended, but as altitude increases, atmospheric pressure drops. The percentage of oxygen remains the same, but there is simply less air to breathe. By the time you cross 8,000 meters, each breath delivers barely a third of the oxygen your body needs to function. You are slowly suffocating with every step you take. K2's summit stands at 8,011 meters. That means climbers spend over 600 vertical meters inside the death zone during their final push. Hours upon hours in a realm where the body cannot sustain itself, no matter how strong or conditioned the climber may be. The effects are devastating. Muscles begin to atrophy, coordination deteriorates, cognitive function, the very thing you need most to make life or death decisions, starts to fail. Your body fights back the only way it knows how. It produces more red blood cells to carry whatever oxygen it can capture. Your heart beats faster, desperately trying to circulate blood to starving tissues. You breathe deeper, harder, but it is never enough. The debt keeps growing. Acclimatization helps, but only to a point. Climbers spend weeks rotating up and down the mountain, sleeping at progressively higher camps to give their bodies time to adapt. But adaptation has limits. Above 8,000 meters, there is no adapting. There is only deterioration. This is where altitude sickness turns lethal. High-altitude pulmonary edema, known as HAPE, fills the lungs with fluid. Climbers begin to drown in their own bodies. High-altitude cerebral edema, HACE, causes the brain to swell inside the skull. Confusion sets in. Judgment vanishes. Climbers have been known to unclip from safety ropes, convinced they no longer need them. Others have simply sat down in the snow and refused to move, unaware that they were freezing to death. The cruelest part is that the death zone robs you of the ability to recognize the danger you are in. Your oxygen-starved brain cannot process the warning signs. You feel tired, yes, but you rationalize it. You feel dizzy, but you push on. By the time you realize something is truly wrong, it is often too late to save yourself. Everest shares this same death zone, but its more gradual slopes allow for faster movement. K2 offers no such mercy. The terrain is steeper. The climbing is slower. Every minute spent in the death zone increases your odds of never leaving it. And yet altitude is only one of the forces trying to kill you on this mountain. Above K2, the sky itself becomes a weapon. K2 sits further north than Everest, and that geographical difference changes everything. While Everest enjoys relatively predictable weather windows during climbing season, K2 lies directly in the path of the jet stream. This river of fast-moving air, racing through the upper atmosphere at speeds that can exceed 200 miles per hour, brings weather systems that shift from calm to catastrophic without warning. Forecasting technology has improved dramatically since K2 was first summited in 1954, but the mountain remains fundamentally unpredictable. Climbers have learned to accept a brutal truth. On K2 Basi in Gintu, the sky does not cooperate. It ambushes. In winter, conditions become unsurvivable. Gusts reach hurricane force, powerful enough to rip a climber from the mountainside and hurl them into the void like a discarded rag. Even during the summer climbing season, when teams make their attempts, the weather windows are narrow and unreliable. A clear morning can dissolve into a blinding whiteout by noon. Temperatures that were merely brutal can plunge to deadly within hours. And then there are the avalanches. K2's steep faces and massive ice formations create constant instability. Snow accumulates on slopes too steep to hold it. Seracs, towering blocks of glacial ice weighing thousands of tons, cling to ridges until gravity finally wins. When they release, there is no outrunning them, no warning, just a roar from above and a wall of white death descending faster than the human brain can process. August 1st, 2008. Conditions on K2 seemed favorable. Multiple teams were positioned for summit attempts, spirits high after weeks of preparation. The weather window had finally opened. Dozens of climbers began their push toward the peak, navigating the most dangerous section of the entire mountain, the Bottleneck. This narrow gully, angled at nearly 50 degrees, forces climbers to traverse directly beneath a massive overhanging serac. Millions of tons of ice suspended above, groaning under its own weight. Waiting for the moment physics decides it can no longer hold. Every climber who passes through the Bottleneck knows the risk. They move quickly, clip into fixed ropes, and pray. On August 1st, those prayers went unanswered. An ice avalanche broke from the Serac and swept through the Bottleneck. Fixed ropes were destroyed. Climbers were struck, buried, or left stranded without the lines they needed to descend. Chaos erupted across the upper mountain. Some died instantly. Others perished in the hours that followed, trapped above the break with no way down. By the time the disaster ended, 11 climbers were dead. 3 more were seriously injured. It remains the deadliest single event in K2's history. To this day, some details of what happened remain unknown. The mountain keeps its secrets, and the Serac that caused the disaster still hangs above the Bottleneck, exactly where it has always been. Every climber who attempts K2 must pass beneath it, staring up at the same frozen guillotine, knowing it will fall again someday. The only question is whether they will be beneath it when it does. The route most climbers take up K2 is called the Abruzzi Spur. It is considered the easiest path to the summit. That description is almost laughable when you understand what it actually demands. Over 75% of all K2 attempts follow this route, not because it is safe, but because every alternative is worse. The western and southern faces present even steeper technical challenges. The eastern face has never been successfully climbed. The Abruzzi Spur is simply the least impossible option on a mountain designed to kill. From base camp at 5,000 meters, climbers face a relentless 60 to 70 degree slope stretching all the way to Camp 3 at 7,450 meters. There is no gradual warm-up, no gentle introduction. The mountain attacks, immediately and never lets up. The first major obstacle is House's Chimney, a 100-foot vertical crack splitting a sheer rock wall. Climbers must wedge themselves inside and claw their way upward, fighting for every inch while wearing crampons designed for ice, not rock. One slip means a potentially fatal fall. Those who survive the Chimney reach Camp 2 at 6,760 meters, where a brief rest awaits before the real nightmare begins. The Black Pyramid. This massive wall of steep, dark rock rises nearly 400 meters above the climbers. For perspective, the Great Pyramid of Giza stands 146 meters tall. The Black Pyramid dwarfs it by almost 3 times. Every meter must be fought for, hands and feet searching for holds on rock that crumbles without warning, bodies pressed against the mountain as the void yawns beneath. Near Camp 3, a 25-foot vertical wall of ice blocks the path. Climbers haul themselves over it, and finally collapse into tents pitched on a 30-degree slope. Sleep comes poorly, if at all. The angle is too steep for rest. The altitude too punishing for recovery. Camp 4 sits at 8,000 meters, the death zone. Here, climbers enter what some describe as the eye of the storm, a brief flat section where they can catch their breath before the final push. But there is no peace in this place, only the knowledge of what comes next. The Bottleneck awaits. That narrow gully beneath millions of tons of hanging ice. Climbers traverse it in the early morning darkness, headlamps cutting through the black. Every second spent beneath the Serac a gamble against physics and time. Then, the summit. The peak of K2. For a brief, breathless moment, you stand where only hundreds of humans have ever stood. But reaching the top is not victory. It is halftime. Over 80% of deaths on K2 occur during descent. Climbers who push their bodies to the absolute limit getting up now face the same brutal terrain going down. Exhausted, oxygen-starved, mentally compromised. The discipline that carried them to the summit often abandons them on the way back. Mistakes happen, ropes are missed, footing is lost. The mountain collects its toll, not when climbers are ascending with determination in their hearts. It collects when they are descending, empty, with nothing left to give. For decades, K2's summit remained one of the loneliest places any human could stand. Fewer people had reached its peak, than had orbited the Earth in spacecraft. The mountain's reputation as an unconquerable killer kept all but the most elite climbers away. But in recent years, something has begun to change. The same commercialization that transformed Everest into a bucket list destination has slowly crept toward K2. More fixed ropes, more Sherpa support, more predictable logistics. In 22, the mountain saw over 190 successful summits, shattering all previous records. On a single day that July, more than 145 climbers reached the peak within 24 hours. Numbers that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. With increased traffic has come a declining fatality rate. What was once a roughly 25% chance of death has dropped significantly. K2 is becoming, by its own savage standards, more survivable. Some might call this progress. Others might call it a dangerous illusion. Because the mountain has not changed. The death zone still starves your cells of oxygen. The jet stream still brings weather that can shift from calm to catastrophic in minutes. The Serac above the Bottleneck still hangs there, millions of tons of ice waiting for gravity to make its move. The only difference now is that more people are willing to gamble that they won't be beneath it when it falls. K2 does not care about improved logistics or better forecasting technology. It does not care about your training, your sponsors, or how many followers are tracking your ascent. The mountain has been killing climbers since humans first dared to set foot on its slopes, and it will continue long after we are gone. Every body that remains frozen on its ridges is a reminder that some places on Earth do not welcome human ambition. The savage mountain earned its name, and no matter how many reach its summit in the years to come, K2 will always demand its toll. The only question for those who attempt it is simple. Will you be one of the lucky ones who makes it back down?